Erin Mallory was 5 years old, the first time she heard a jet engine roar overhead. She looked up from her backyard in rural Oklahoma, mouth wide open, eyes scanning the sky until the silver streak disappeared beyond the clouds. While other kids played house or built tree forts, Erin built runways out of gravel and designed cockpits from cardboard. Her father, a retired Air Force mechanic, would smile quietly as she lined up toy planes by type and model, teaching herself to pronounce Cessna, Gulfstream, and Boeing long before she could spell Mississippi. By 12, she could name nearly every commercial aircraft in service, along with the altitude and range of each. At 15, she volunteered at a local airstrip, trading cleanup duty for 30-minute co-pilot rides. By 17, she had logged her first solo flight. "You're born for this," her instructor said, shaking his head after she landed smoothly in gusty winds. "It's like the yoke listens to you." Erin earned a full scholarship to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, where she graduated top of her class. She was the first in her family to earn a degree. By 22, she held her commercial pilot's license and over 1,000 flight hours in everything from Cessnas to twin-engine jets. Her recommendations glowed. Her simulators were flawless. Her instructors all agreed. She was a future captain. In the making, but the industry didn't seem to agree. Her first application to a major airline was returned with a polite rejection. No reason given. The second time, she made it to interview's technical round passed, final flight test near perfect. Yet again, we've chosen to pursue other candidates. After the fifth rejection, Erin asked for feedback. The answer was cryptic. "You're technically proficient, but maybe not a fit for our team culture." Behind closed doors, there were whispers. It had started during her final exam at training or check ride. Captain Ron Mathers, a grizzled senior pilot with over 30 years in the industry, had supervised the session. During a simulated emergency landing, Erin had questioned a decision he made about fuel dumping. "With respect, Captain," she had said, "the FAA updated that procedure 2 years ago. What you're suggesting could compromise the glide slope." He had gone silent. The rest of the session passed with icy tension. She landed the aircraft smoothly, hit every protocol, and passed the technical score. But he never signed the endorsement. Behind her back, he reportedly told the panel, "She's got skill, but she doesn't know her place." Too quick to challenge authority. That line, spoken in one room, followed her into every other dot. It was never printed, never official. But her file, passed between hiring managers, always carried a quiet no. She was labeled as high risk, not because she made mistakes, but because she refused to remain silent when something was wrong. Erin knew it too. She could feel it in the way interviews shifted after a certain point, the way hiring boards smiled less when she mentioned her check ride or asked about the name Mathers. It didn't matter that she was right. Aviation, after all, was built on hierarchy. And hierarchy doesn't like being challenged. The most painful part? Watching her classmates, some less experienced, some with minor incidents in their records, climb into cockpits while she sat on the sidelines. One by one, they got their wings. She got silence. Her confidence didn't fade, but her hope wavered, eventually. To stay close to aviation, Erin accepted a job in airline ground operations at Skyway Regional, a medium-tier domestic carrier. Her responsibilities: assist with safety checks, monitor weather patterns, and run pre-flight coordination between flight crews and control towers. It was a good job, secure, with benefits. But every time she handed a clipboard to a pilot, she felt the ache. Every time she stood outside on the tarmac, headset on, watching a jet pull away, her jet, in her mind, something in her chest, twisted. And every time she looked up at the sky, She whispered the same quiet sentence under her breath. Someday, I'll be up there again. She didn't know when. She didn't know how. But something deep inside her refused to believe that her final chapter had already been written. Not yet. Asterisk at first. Erin told herself it was temporary. A few months on the ground, then someone would notice her. A supervisor, a pilot, maybe even a morgue member. Someone would say, "Hey, that Mallory girl, she's overqualified. Why isn't she flying?" But months became a year, and then another, and Erin remained on the tarmac. Always 5 feet away from the cockpit, but never inside it, she became a fixture at Skyway Regional's Dallas-Fort Worth Operations Center. Her days started before dawn, walking the same concrete slabs she used to dream of soaring above. Her headset crackled with calls as she coordinated fueling, cargo weights, weather updates, and passenger loadouts. She was excellent at it, faster than anyone else, almost unnaturally precise. One pilot called her the quiet control tower. Another joked she probably knew more about the plane than he did. He wasn't wrong, but jokes don't get you wings. She trained new hires, solved dispatch emergencies, and rewrote procedural manuals in her free time. Skyway gave her awards, bonuses, and once even featured her in a corporate video titled "The Team Behind the Skies." But the same managers who applauded her never once mentioned the word promotion. She wasn't even allowed to sit in on flight crew briefings. Her pilot's license, still valid, still immaculate, gathered digital dust. Sometimes, she'd slip away to the flight simulators in the basement after hours. She had the codes. She'd run through mock takeoffs and instrument failures until her fingers ached. Alone in the darkened sim, she flew the skies she couldn't touch. She knew every button, every checklist. It was second nature, like muscle memory in her bones. But as soon as she stepped outside, she was just another ops technician with a clipboard. One Saturday, she drove an hour to a small airfield in Weatherford. There, for a modest fee, she could still fly recreational aircraft. The staff loved her. A few flight instructors even asked her to sit in on training days and co-pilot with nervous newcomers. She never said no. In those moments, gliding through quiet Oklahoma skies, helping 18-year-olds learn to trust the throttle, she found something that still felt like purpose. But even those flights felt borrowed. "Why don't you fly commercial?" One student asked her once, wide-eyed. Erin paused, smiled, and replied, "It's complicated." Her parents had stopped asking about it. Her friends from flight school, the few she kept in touch with, mostly flew for big airlines now, posting cockpit selfies from New York, LA, and overseas layovers. Erin double-tapped their photos, but rarely commented. There wasn't much to say. Still, she never gave up. She read FAA manuals at night, like other people read novels. She subscribed to industry newsletters, followed aviation incidents, and tracked airline mergers. She practiced checklists in her sleep. Her conviction hadn't changed. Only the world around her had gone quiet. The closest she came to giving up was late one December night. A storm had rolled in, delaying half the regional flights. She'd been on shift for 14 hours straight, running between terminals, soaked from the rain. Her boots squished with every step. She watched one of her former classmates, now a captain, rush past, laughing with his crew. He didn't recognize her. Or worse, he did and kept walking. She went into the break room, pulled off her jacket, and sat down in silence. For 10 whole minutes, she stared at her old license photo in her wallet. Then she stood up. She wasn't done if they wouldn't let her fly. She'd be the best damn ground operator in the country. She'd wait. She'd watch. She'd stay ready. And when the skies finally called her name again, and she was certain they would, she wouldn't need a second to prepare, because Erin Mallory had never stopped being a pilot. She was just waiting for the world to remember. It was a Monday morning when Erin saw the name, the schedule board in Skyway. Operations room was buzzing as usual, pilots clocking in, crew rotations shifting, maintenance tags being updated. Erin scanned her daily manifest out of habit, checking assignments for the departing regional flights. Then her eyes froze on a familiar entry. Flight 728, Dallas-Fort Worth to Denver. Captain Ronald Mathers. She hadn't heard that name aloud in nearly 3 years, but it hit her like wind shear. Ron Mathers. The man who'd sabotaged her career with a single sentence. The one who had walked out of her final check ride without a word, then quietly ensured her name would be flagged for every cockpit seat at Skyway and beyond. She'd seen his name, buried in reports, sometimes tied to senior-level safety audits or legacy flight evaluations, but never on an active flight roster. She thought he'd retired. Apparently not. Mathers is back? She asked one of the dispatchers casually, masking her surprise. Yeah, he replied, not looking up. Got pulled out of semi-retirement for fill-ins. They're stretched thin since 2 captains left last month. Only flying high-seniority routes, though. Denver run today. Erin turned away before her face could give anything away. She didn't hate him. Hatred was too simple. What she felt was more like cold resentment. A wound that hadn't fully scabbed over. She remembered every moment of that fateful check ride, how she'd answered every question with sharp precision, followed every protocol to the letter. And then, how she dared to challenge his outdated emergency fuel response mid-simulation. It hadn't been disrespect. It had been right. By the book right? FIA updated right? But in aviation, there's often a silent rule. Don't correct the captain, even when he's wrong. Erin had done it anyway, and Mathers hadn't forgotten. She'd heard the rumors after, how he quietly told the board she was not compliant with authority and emotionally reactive under pressure. None of it in writing, just whispers behind doors. Enough to keep her grounded without ever explaining why. Now he was flying again, later that morning. As she walked across the tarmac, the hot Texas sun bouncing off the concrete, she spotted the Denver-bound jet at gate 14. Her boots echoed under the passenger bridge tunnel as she handed off the pre-flight paperwork. And then, stepping down from the aircraft, she saw him. Captain Ronald Mathers. He looked older. His once dark hair was now fully gray, his frame leaner, his gait a little slower. But the expression hadn't changed. Sharp-eyed, serious, confident. In that way senior pilots carry, like the sky had personally licensed them. He didn't see her at first. She stood quietly near the forward cargo hold, checking weight readouts on her tablet. Then, as he turned toward the nose gear, their eyes met. A flicker of recognition. He paused. A second passed. 2, maybe 3. And then he gave a single nod. Not warm, not cold, just acknowledgement. The kind given to someone you remember, but not fondly. Erin returned the nod. No words. He walked past her into the fuselage. She stood still for a moment, the roar of a nearby plane filling the silence. What was she expecting? An apology? A confession? A sudden change of heart? Pilots don't apologize, especially not to someone they believe they had to put in their place. But something about seeing him again, after all this time, didn't hurt the way she thought it would. She was still here. Still in the game. And now, fate had put them on the same flight path again, even if just for a few minutes. She watched the boarding begin. Passengers filed in. A flight attendant asked for final confirmation. Erin handed over her signed checklist, stepped back, and looked at the cockpit door as it closed. She didn't know it yet, but this flight, this exact one, would change everything. Mathers may have tried to ground her once, but the sky wasn't. finished with her yet. Asterisk Flight 728 was cleared for departure at 10:42 a.m. The Texas heat shimmered off the runway as passengers filed aboard, dragging carry-ons, juggling coffees, and chatting in that distracted, travel-worn tone. From her workstation beside the jet bridge, Erin monitored the load balance data on her tablet. Everything was routine. Cargo weight balanced, fuel topped off, weather clear to Denver. A normal flight. Nothing unusual. Inside the cockpit, Captain Ron Mathers was going through his pre-flight ritual with the quiet precision of a man who had done this thousands of times. He barely acknowledged his young co-pilot, First Officer Alex Benson, fresh out of training. Alex was nervous, but tried to hide it behind crisp replies and focused eyes. All green, Alex reported. Mathers nodded, his face unreadable. He adjusted his headset and scanned the takeoff checklist. In the cabin, flight attendants secured the last of the overhead bins. Erin handed off her final clearance form to the gate agent and turned to leave. Another job done. Then came the call. Sharp voice over her headset. Operations. This is Flight 728. We have a medical emergency. Cockpit. Repeat. Medical emergency in the cockpit. Erin froze. Say again? The voice cracked back, urgent and panicked. The captain's collapsed. We need paramedics immediately. He's unresponsive. Her heart lurched. Within seconds. Alarms triggered at the operations board. Emergency protocols engaged. The plane, which had just begun to taxi, was halted and immediately rerouted back to the gate. Paramedics were dispatched, and the air bridge was repositioned in record time. Erin rushed to the gate, pushing through ground staff and stepping onto the aircraft once more, but not as a passenger or crew. As someone who needed to see it with her own eyes, the cockpit door was open. Inside, Captain Mathers slumped in his seat, pale and still, his headset dangling. Two paramedics were already working to assess his vitals. One began CPR as the other pulled out a defibrillator. Flight attendants had cleared the first rows of passengers, whose wide eyes and hushed voices betrayed a creeping fear. Alex Benson stood off to the side, frozen, his face sheet white. His hands trembled as he explained what had happened. How? Mathers had coughed mid-sentence, clutched his chest, and collapsed onto the controls just moments before taxi. He didn't even say anything, Alex whispered. He was fine, then just gone. The paramedics loaded Mathers onto a stretcher, his vitals faint but present. The cabin watched in stunned silence as the man once called iron nerves was wheeled off his own flight, eyes shut, color drained. As the emergency crew exited, an uncomfortable quiet fell over the crew and passengers. Everyone looked at Alex. He looked terrified. The first officer may have been licensed, but he had never flown a full commercial flight solo, not without a senior captain. And certainly not under stress like this. What happens now? A passenger called out nervously. Another one added, "Are we still flying?" The flight attendant turned toward the cockpit, eyes searching for answers. The answer didn't come from Alex. It came from behind him. "She's certified," someone said, pointing. "Erin? She's a pilot." Erin blinked. She hadn't realized. How many people had recognized her? How many flight crews she'd worked with over the years? They all knew her resume, her skill, her silence. They also knew the unofficial band. Alex looked at her, eyes wide. "Is that true?" Erin hesitated, not because she was unsure, but because after years of being told no, her body had forgotten what yes felt like. She nodded. "I'm fully licensed. Rated for this aircraft. Logged over 1,000 hours. They?" Gate manager turned to the Skyway supervisor on duty. "There's no other captain in range. The nearest backup is in Houston, 2 hours out." More silence. The supervisor looked at Erin, Then, finally, gave a tight nod. Mallory, you're up. Mallory, you're up. The words struck like lightning. Erin stood still for a second, her headset still slung around her neck, her clipboard forgotten at her side. She looked at the Skyway supervisor, waiting for him to take it back, waiting for the catch, the disclaimer, the excuse. But it didn't come. He was serious, eyes locked on hers. No one else could do it. No one else was qualified. And now, suddenly, after all the silence, all the closed doors, all the quiet no, see, she was being called to the one place she wasn't supposed to return. The cockpit. She moved without thinking, her boots clicking up the jet bridge, past stunned flight attendants, past wide-eyed passengers. A few recognized her, the quiet operations expert always walking the ramp, always calm, always focused. Someone whispered, "Is she really a pilot?" Inside the cockpit, the tension was sharp and tight, like air that hadn't been breathed. Alex, the young first officer, looked up with visible relief. "You're Erin Mallory, right?" he asked. "I've heard of you. They say you used to fly." "I still do," she said evenly, sliding into the left seat. The cockpit was familiar. Too familiar. Her hands knew exactly where to go, fingers instinctively moving over switches and instruments. Every button, every dial, every indicator, it was all still home. Her heart pounded against her rib cage, but her voice remained steady. "Let's walk through the checklist." Alex nodded quickly, grateful to have her. He'd only logged a handful of flights in the right seat. This was his first emergency. His confidence was shaken, but Erin's calm pulled him back into focus. Engine 1, stable. Engine 2, stable. Flaps, set. Fuel confirmed. She went through every line, methodical as ever. She didn't skip a single detail. Meanwhile, on the tarmac, the Skyway team scrambled to confirm compliance. Technically, Erin was still licensed and rated for the aircraft. Her medicals were up to date. Nothing on paper barred her from flying. But the internal ban, the one nobody ever admitted existed, had never been written. Just understood. And now, with 100 passengers waiting and no captain available within 200 miles, corporate had a choice: delay the flight for hours, or let the woman they quietly exiled do the job she was born to do. In the end, necessity beat politics. Flight 728, came the voice from air traffic control. "You are cleared to taxi." Erin nodded at Alex. "Let's go." The aircraft began to move, gliding down the taxiway as if nothing had happened. In the cabin, passengers murmured in low tones, some nervous, others curious. Word had already begun to spread. The woman flying the plane wasn't supposed to be flying at all. In the cockpit, Erin focused. She hadn't touched commercial flight controls in years, but it felt like slipping into rhythm with an old song. Her instincts returned, every movement confident, precise. She called out commands, adjusted settings, coordinated with the tower. Alex followed her lead like a student watching a masterclass. As they approached the runway, she glanced at the co-pilot. "You good?" He gave a shaky thumbs up. "I've got your back." The final clearance came through. "Flight 728, you are cleared for immediate takeoff. Runway 36L. Erin's hands moved to the throttles. She pushed forward. The engines roared. The aircraft surged down the runway. For a split second, she held her breath, the same breath she'd been holding for 3 years, waiting for someone, somewhere, to finally let her fly. Then the wheels lifted. The ground dropped away. Erin Mallory was in the sky again, not as a student, not in a simulator, not behind a clipboard, but as the pilot in command, and no one could stop her now. Asterisk, the roar of the engines faded into a steady hum as Flight 728 leveled out at 35,000 feet, slicing through the open blue. The sky stretched endlessly before them, and for the first time in years, Erin Mallory sat where she had always belonged. In the captain's seat, hands steady on the controls, heart finally catching up to her destiny. Beside her, First Officer Alex Benson still looked shaken but focused, his eyes darting between instruments and the horizon. He'd flown hundreds of hours in simulators, but never a commercial flight under this kind of pressure, never with a captain collapsing beside him, and certainly never with a once-banned pilot suddenly taking command. But Erin? She looked like she'd never left. Every adjustment she made was smooth, every command delivered with calm clarity. Her voice over the radio was cool, measured, confident, the voice of a leader. If anyone listening knew the history behind the woman flying Flight 728, they'd never guess it from her tone. Autopilot set, she said. Course confirmed to Denver. ETA 1 hour, 48 minutes. Alex nodded. Systems look good. Then we fly. She leaned back for a second, her gaze out the window. The Rockies were still far ahead, a misty shadow on the horizon. The sky was clear, not a single warning light in sight. But inside Erin, emotions flared like warning beacons she hadn't prepared for. For 3 years, she'd worked flights without ever touching the controls. She'd smiled through promotions she wasn't offered. She'd trained junior staff, now flew planes she wasn't allowed to. She had waited, silently, patiently, while the industry pretended her career didn't exist. And now? Now she was proving to an entire airline, to a stunned co-pilot, and perhaps most importantly, to herself, that none of those years had erased who she was. You didn't forget, she thought. You're still a damn pilot. From the back of the plane, a flight attendant stepped quietly into the cockpit doorway. She knocked once on the metal frame and gave a soft smile. Just wanted to say, passengers are calm. A few asked about the captain. We told them he had a medical emergency, and the flight's in excellent hands. You've got some curious fans back there. Erin gave a half smile. Let's make sure they have nothing but a smooth ride. As the attendant left, Alex glanced over. They didn't tell us you were, grounded. I wasn't grounded, she replied. Just sidelined. He hesitated. What happened? She paused, weighing whether to share the truth. Then she looked him in the eye. I challenged the wrong man during my final check ride. He didn't like being corrected. Word got around. That was enough. Alex blinked. You're kidding. That's it? That's all it took. A long silence passed between them. Finally, he said, Well, for what it's worth, I'm really damn glad you're here. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she tapped the yoke gently, like greeting an old friend. It was never about being perfect, she said quietly. It was about staying ready, so that if the day ever came, I wouldn't freeze. She turned her head toward him. And neither should you? Alex sat up straighter. The rest of the flight passed uneventfully, just the way passengers prefer. But in the cockpit, it was anything but ordinary. Erin Mallory had not just returned to flying. She had just redefined herself. Not as a shadow behind a clipboard or a name stuck in personnel purgatory, but as a leader in command, taking back what had always been hers. As the plane began its descent into Denver, Erin looked at the horizon. Bold, bright, limitless. She wasn't just flying again. She was rising. The landing was flawless. Not just smooth textbook. As Flight 728 touched down on the runway at Denver International, the wheels kissed the pavement so gently that several passengers applauded. Erin didn't even flinch. She guided the aircraft through taxi like she'd never left the skies, handling radio comms and post-landing procedures with crisp authority. When they reached the gate, the engines powered down, the cabin lights brightened. and the seatbelt signs switched off with a familiar chime. But there was nothing familiar about the moment that followed. The flight attendant opened the cockpit door and whispered, "They're waiting." Erin stood up. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of what had just happened. She stepped into the aisle and froze. Passengers were standing, not rushing to deplane, not reaching for overhead bins. They were standing, still, staring at her. Then someone clapped. It started slow. One set of hands, then two. Then it spread like wildfire through the cabin. Applause filled the narrow space. Some cheered. Others called out thank yous. One older woman in row 22 placed her hand on her heart and mouthed, "Thank you for getting us home." Erin gave a nod and a modest smile, her throat tightening. This wasn't a hero's welcome. This was something rarer, recognition. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. Alex emerged behind her, still stunned. He whispered in her ear, "You're going to be all over the news, you know." She didn't answer. She wasn't thinking about headlines, but the headlines were already writing themselves. By the time she returned to Dallas that evening, Erin's name had started trending on aviation forums. A flight attendant had posted a picture of her at the controls with the caption, "Pilot collapses mid-takeoff. Ground operator steps in and saves 100+ lives. Hashtag Flight 728 hashtag Erin Mallory." From there, it spread like jet fuel on fire. Local news stations picked it up first, running the story under headlines like, "Ground Staff Hero, Banned Pilot Saves Flight." From the tarmac to the cockpit. The Erin Mallory story. Why wasn't she flying in the first place? Then came national outlets. And then, the questions. Skyway Regional scrambled to respond. The company's legal and PR teams went into high alert, reviewing old HR files, tracking down statements, and trying clumsily to manage the narrative. The public wanted answers. Why had a fully licensed, clearly capable pilot been relegated to the ground for 3 years? An anonymous employee leaked the truth. Her check ride with Captain Mathers. The unofficial blacklisting. The quiet punishment for speaking up. Within 48 hours, aviation bloggers were dissecting her simulator scores, her certifications, her spotless record. Airline whistleblowers came forward. One wrote in an op-ed, "Mallory was punished for being right in a room full of fragile egos." Erin stayed quiet. She declined interviews, ignored news vans. She wasn't in it for fame. All she wanted was the one thing they denied her, a fair seat in the sky. But she couldn't hide from what came next. Her union representatives called. The FAA called. Then finally, Skyway called. A board member, sheepish and scripted, asked to meet with her in person. She walked into that meeting in her ground crew uniform, boots dusty, clipboard in hand. The same woman they had overlooked. The same woman who had kept their planes running for years in silence. They offered an apology. They called it a miscommunication. Then they offered her what she'd never stopped preparing for, a permanent captain's position, this time with her name on the flight deck door. Erin didn't say yes right away. She let them sit in silence, the kind that comes after years of being ignored, before finally nodding. "Good," she said, "because next time, I'm not waiting for someone to collapse before I fly." 6 weeks later, Gate 19 was busier than usual, not with delays or overbooked flights, but with murmurs. People were whispering, phones quietly raised, eyes casually turning toward the jet bridge, like something extraordinary was about to happen. Or someone. Inside the terminal, a little girl clutched a stuffed airplane and stared at the glass wall, overlooking the runway. She stood on her toes, pointing excitedly. "Is she flying our plane, Mama?" Her mother smiled. I think so, sweetheart. That's Captain Erin Mallory. And right then, the door opened. Erin stepped through in full uniform, pilot wings shining on her chest, captain stripes crisp on her sleeves, her posture composed but unmistakably proud. There was a brief hush, not from awkwardness, from respect. Recognition. Some applauded. Others simply nodded. She nodded back, not grandstanding, just acknowledging them the way she always had, calm, focused, ready. It was her first official flight as captain since the day that changed everything. She wasn't substituting anymore. She wasn't filling in. She wasn't being quietly tolerated or overlooked. This flight, Flight 360 to Chicago, had her name printed on the manifest. She stepped into the cockpit like it was muscle memory, because it was. But this time, everything felt different. This time, her name was on the door. Her voice led the crew briefing, her flight plan, her decisions, and no one watching her doubted whether she deserved it. Her new co-pilot, a woman named Dana with 3 years of regional experience, looked at her as they prepped the controls. "Just so you know," Dana said, half laughing, "you're a bit of a legend around here." Erin raised an eyebrow. "A legend?" "Yeah, we all watched the news. They showed that Denver landing on a loop in the break room for 3 days. You've got half the junior staff quoting your checklist rhythm like it's scripture." Erin smirked. "Then let's give them another one to remember." As they finished the pre-flight sequence, the lead flight attendant knocked on the door. "Cabin is secure. Also, there's a little girl in row 4 who asked if she could meet the captain. She's got a toy plane and a big smile." Erin paused, then stood, buttoned her jacket, and stepped into the cabin. There she was, maybe 6 or 7, sitting forward in her seat with excitement beaming from every inch of her face. The stuffed plane in her hands had a pair of glitter-covered wings. The little girl's eyes lit up the second she saw Erin. "You're the captain?" "I am," Erin said with a warm smile, kneeling beside her seat. "And I hear you're a future pilot?" The girl nodded furiously. "I'm gonna fly one day, just like you." Erin handed her a pin from her pocket, a silver wing badge, the same one she'd been given when she first soloed at 17. "Then you'd better start collecting your wings early." The girl took it with reverence, like it was made of gold. Back in the cockpit, Erin sat down and placed her hand on the throttle. She didn't rush it. She didn't need to. The sky wasn't running away from her anymore. The tower gave clearance. Confirmed the heading. The engines came alive. As the aircraft rolled forward. Climbing into the early morning sky, Erin glanced at the horizon. She didn't see clouds. She didn't see obstacles. She saw freedom. No more whispered rumors. No more waiting for someone else to give her permission. She was the captain now, and this time, no one could ground her, because she hadn't just earned the seat. She had taken it back. With grace, with grit, with everything they said she didn't have. And now, soaring above the clouds with the sunrise ahead, and a little girl watching her from row 4, Erin Mallory flew toward a future no one could take from her again.